Okay, everyone. So I'm going to just go through a few slides today. There's been no major updates on the sort of sponsorship pathway. So I'm just going to talk about where we are right now with some updates or news that we've heard, or some tips that might help you if you're still in the process of applying for the visas to come to Canada. And then I thought, just for the sake of using the time effectively, I would talk a little bit about applying for open work permits from inside Canada in case there are people who had visas and they already could come to Canada, and they might be here and they might need to apply from inside Canada for those open work permits. So first, just a few updates. I mentioned just first when I got on the call here, there's a change to the biometric age range. So right now they should only be asking for biometrics. That's the photograph and the fingerprints given at the visa application center for those between 17 and 61. So this is specific to this Ukrainian visa pathway. And it's just a little bit of a reduction in the age range. So if you've already been asked to give biometrics, but you're over 61 or under 17, so it used to be 14 to 79, you're supposed to get correspondence from immigration saying that you don't have to provide biometrics. If you don't get that correspondence, or you're worried about it, you can reach out to me and we can talk about what you might want to do. The next thing I wanted to talk briefly about is there's been a lot of back and forth about what about consent for children who are not traveling with both of their parents. So this is normally, like I said last time, a bit of a big deal. Like you would have to have some sort of document or letter from your from the other parent allowing you to come to Canada, and border officers would normally be looking for that. Right now, again, we're not really seeing border officers look for that. They're being pretty lenient, but there's been some suggestion for people. And again, I would encourage, if it is possible to get some sort of a letter, ideally it's a notarized letter, but I mean, that's probably a stretch for most people. But some sort of a letter or something from the other parent, that's ideal. Again, you don't have to, and I wouldn't hesitate to apply if you don't have that, or to come to Canada if you don't have that right now. But I did want to link a link to the government website here of sample letters from parents that you might be able to get. Again, if you can't get it notarized, but you can get someone to sign the letter, that would be great. We don't know, but maybe for future applications, like a permanent resident application, they might really be looking for more of that consent, because again, that's a more permanent move to Canada. So we'll have to see what they say about that down the line, but I did want to draw your attention to that consent for the children. Oh, I also want to make sure that everybody had this link to this online tool to contact IRCC about your application. So this is a specific web form to use to contact IRCC if you have questions or concerns, or you need to provide documentation for your visa application that you already submitted. So I'm just providing that link here, and I think we're going to send these slides around. I wanted to make a note on the medicals as well. So the medicals are something that normally Ukrainians would have to do before they come to Canada if they're going to stay for more than 6 months. But in this case, they're being waived for the sort of pre-departure medical to get the visa. But they're going to be asking Ukrainians to provide the medicals within 90 days of arrival in Canada. If they're coming from Ukraine or Poland, or they've been in Ukraine in the last year. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that immigration medicals have to be done by panel physicians. In New Brunswick right now, there are 3. So I've just got their their name and contact information here. If you have a family member who is going to be somewhere else in Canada initially, or they're in another country and you're wondering if there's a panel physician, I've provided a link here to where you can search for where there is a panel physician closest to you that you might be able to go to. So it can't just be any doctor, it has to be a specific doctor, and their immigration medicals. A little note here too on the requirements for flying into Canada if you're at the stage where you're booking flights or people are arriving or planning their travels. Ukrainians right now are exempt from needing to be vaccinated. I think I mentioned that last time. So that means that it doesn't matter if they have a vaccine that's not accepted in Canada or they don't have any vaccination for COVID-19, where they would normally be restricted from coming, they're being allowed to enter Canada. They can also get on a connecting flight. So within Canada, you might have heard people say, like, you have to be vaccinated to get on flights in Canada, but the Ukrainians will be exempted if they're getting on a connecting flight that's connecting within 24 hours of the departure. So most flights would fall under that. If it gets delayed, it's supposed to still be okay. I would suggest that you leave your family members a little bit of time if they're flying, say, Toronto, Montreal, and then Fredericton or Moncton or somewhere, because they're going to want some time when they first arrive at the first gate into Canada, because that's where they're going to be issued their immigration documentation. So you don't want them to feel rushed to connect to a flight. And I think a lot of flights kind of arrive in the afternoon or the evening, and then they might be taking a morning flight to Canada, but make sure they have a little bit of time there at their first port of entry. They will use ArriveCan, so that's a specific tool that the Canadian government's using. It's an app, or you can use it online, so they'll fill in their information there. They will have a pre-arrival test for COVID-19 if they're not fully vaccinated with an accepted vaccine, and they will be expected to quarantine for 14 days if they're not fully vaccinated. So it's just really that, not that they don't have to be fully vaccinated to come to Canada, but the other requirements apply. So I'm going to talk about today applying for the open work permit from inside Canada, but before I get into that, I just want to reiterate that anybody who's applying for their visa and they're in Ukraine or they're outside Canada right now, and they're using that sort of special Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel application that we went through, those people have a special box, right, or question that they're ticking off saying, yes, I want a work permit. So those people can apply. They're basically applying for the work permit from outside Canada, and they'll get the permit when they come to the border. Anybody who already has a visa, maybe they're waiting for family members to get their visas, or they're just delayed in their travel to Canada, those people, I would still suggest they ask for the open work permit when they get to the border. So instead of waiting to come in and then applying for it, if they can and they feel comfortable asking for it, they should ask for it at the port of entry. So that would be probably Toronto, Montreal, wherever they fly into first. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it might look like if you're already inside Canada, and because you had a visa and you were here as a visitor already. So the open work permit doesn't have any age restriction. It's important that adults apply for this in order to qualify for Medicare coverage right now in New Brunswick. With an open work permit, they can work for any location in Canada, but they don't have to work, but they can work. And it should be issued for up to 3 years. So again, who can apply for this? This is Ukrainians and immediate families members of Ukrainians. So we're thinking like spouses who might not actually be Ukrainian nationals. They'll need to prove that relationship to the Ukrainian, but they will also be eligible for the open work permit. So a few notes on what it looks like to apply for the permit from inside Canada. You need to have status in Canada to apply for the permit here. So I just want to make a note that if someone enters Canada and they're not given a visitor record, so they don't have any special document giving them status in Canada for a longer period of time, or they don't get a passport stamp, which is frequent, like a lot of times that they don't even get stamped, the default is that you have been allowed in for 6 months, unless someone said otherwise or gave you a document or a stamp that says something different. So with anybody that's kind of came in February or March, they have 6 months to stay here. They are visitors here during that time. But what's important is that they apply to maintain that status if they're going to stay here. So if they apply for the open work permit, that works, but you just kind of want to make sure that you apply within that 6 months. Now, if somebody has a situation where they have a family member who's Ukrainian, or a friend or someone here that they know who has been here for longer than 6 months, or they had a visitor record or they had a work permit but it's expired, I would suggest that you reach out to me and we can talk about that situation and what they need to do. When you apply from inside Canada for a work permit, you actually use a different account than what you're using for the visa. So you'll create a new sort of portal where you'll create and submit these applications. So I've got the link here where you'll click register and you'll create an account with your email address, very similar to what the other portal looks like. I'm also linking here some guides. The first guide is just for specific to applying for the open work permit as a Ukrainian. And the second link is just the normal guide for applying for an open work or for applying for a work permit from inside Canada, because it can give you some tips on how to answer the questions that the forms are asking. So there are specific questions that you're going to answer when you click, when you're in the portal and you start your application. You're going to answer that you want to work in Canada. You're going to say that you want to stay temporarily more than 6 months in Canada. That's because you're asking for a work permit for a longer period of time. You're going to tell them what your current immigration status is. And a note here that for whatever reason, they don't have it set up. So students will actually say that they're workers. If student comes up as an option, click that. But if it doesn't, don't panic, click worker. And then it will ask you, does one of these things apply to you? And one of the options is going to be, I'm applying for an open work permit under an active public policy or pilot program announced by IRCC. And that's what this is. That's what you're applying under. So you will answer yes when you see that in the list. Yes, you're applying for one of these situations. And you will answer that you are exempt from paying the fees because this will be free for Ukrainians. Unlike the visa application, you will actually have some forms that you'll fill in and upload, kind of like documents inside this portal. So the main form is going to be this application to change conditions or extend your stay in Canada. That's because they're already here, they're a visitor, but now they want to be a worker, or they were a worker, but they need to extend and be a worker for longer, or a student and stay as a worker. You may have to fill in the statutory declaration of common law. That's if you have a common law partner only. And if you need that to be notarized, let me know. I can help you with that. Use of representative or authority to release personal information. You might have this and you might not if they're just applying themselves. Probably won't have those forms. And then they're also asking for them to upload the family information form. So that's just going to be literally about their family members. Just a few notes here that are specific when you're filling in your main form. It's going to ask you the details about your intended work in Canada, and you will select open work permit as the type. For the job title, obviously they don't have to have a job or a job title, so they're just going to write Ukraine 2022. For the description of duties that it asks for in the form, you'll write Ukraine 2022 Public Policy Open Work Permit. And for the duration, you can pick any, like if it was me and I was filling it out, I would pick next Monday as my start date. It doesn't really matter unless you think you have a specific date. If they don't meet that date, they will still give you the full duration that they can under the policy. So don't worry about where you're putting for your start date. Just pick a date, and then you can pick your end date to be 3 years later. Now they're saying that you can't ask for an end date beyond the expiry of your passport. That's sort of a normal rule. I don't know. They should be able to issue this if you don't have a passport. So it's weird to me that they're saying this. So I would, for everyone, put in 3 years, regardless of when their passport is expiring. So what kind of documents are you going to have? Well, it's going to look similar to the visa application if you ever did that. Well, for when you did that, even for the normal visa application, you're going to upload documents. So you're going to have proof of fee exemption. That's going to just be a letter that says, I'm exempt from paying the fees under the Ukraine special measures. Literally just a Word document that says that. Sorry, this slide is a little messed up. It should just be a list. Then you're going to have a receipt for a fee if you needed to restore your status. Now, again, if you're someone who no longer lost status or no longer had status, you stayed in Canada beyond what your document said you could, or you've been here for more than 6 months, but you don't have a document, I would suggest reach out to me because that's a particular situation where you need to apply to restore your status. But for the normal application, most people will have their passport or their travel document, a copy of their visitor record or permit if they have one. Some people won't. A digital photo. So I get people just to take their own photo against a white wall, and there's sort of a guide here of what those photos look like. They just look like passport photos, basically just a headshot. You're going to upload your family information form, and you're going to upload your proof of your upfront immigration medical if you have had it already. So if you haven't, I wouldn't say that you should hesitate to apply for your work permit, but you will want to say upload a note to say when you're going to have the immigration medical. And when your appointment is, because again, everybody that's coming in is going to need to have those medicals within 90 days. So if they don't get their work permit for some reason, they're going to be scheduling a medical anyway. You need a medical if you've been in certain countries in the last year and you're asking to stay in Canada for more than 6 months. So that's just a normal rule. So if your family member's been somewhere specific and you don't think they need a medical and you have a specific question about that, we can also talk about whether they would need a medical or not. But most Ukrainians, most people that have lived in Ukraine and been in Ukraine in the last year will need medicals. So that's pretty much the open work permit. I'm going to try to get out of here. And then we can just kind of, if you guys have specific questions or general questions, we can talk about those because there's not a lot of other updates right now that I can provide on any changes or new announcements.